Hello. Hey everybody, I'm Nicole Rivera. I'm the program director of the San Francisco Young Democrats. If everybody can take their seat, we're going to start in 60 seconds. Thank you. Hi, Becky.
Good to see you. How are you?
You too. Thank you for coming, by the way.
What are you talking about? Hey everybody, welcome to the San Francisco Young Democrats Candidate Forum Part 2. I'm Owen Stevens, president of the San Francisco Young Dems. I should have brought the rope up closer, everyone's so spread out. But like all SFYD events, I expect everyone to be trickling in over the next hour, but we're going to get started now, and we already have a number of our great candidates here to speak with us tonight. Just want to go through a couple quick things to start out with. First off, how was that State of the Union, guys? That almost made me feel like you were cheering for it, like it was the best thing you ever heard. How was the State of the Union? It was freaking awful. Who would have thought, who would have thought that we were addicted to oil? And that might be a problem. Good thing we're going up and finding some more in Alaska, right? Or at least efforts to do so. I thought that was nice, ironic one off of our good friend Bush. But this is a question I asked last month. Who is going to be taking back, taking back the governorship in the state in November?
Democrats!
Louder?
Democrats!
One more time.
Democrats!
I love that word. Thank you very much. Okay, so just a quick thing on how things are working tonight. As you were coming in, you might have seen all the questionnaires there on the side. Those are for candidates who are going to be speaking this evening. They're communal, so if you have one, take a look, pass it around, fun stuff like that. There may be additional campaign materials as well. Those of you who will be voting in the endorsements tonight, there will be additional questionnaires for all the candidates, for all elected, for all the offices that we're endorsing available in the voting area. For the candidates, just so you know, our setup this evening is I'm going to be giving you each 5 minutes to speak, and then we're going to have people coming up to the microphones on the side to ask about 5 minutes of questions. Now, it's only 5 minutes of questions, and I know people have a lot of questions, so the best way to do that is nice, effective, and short questions, if at all possible. That way we get more in there, more information. Just a suggestion. Then a little more information on, actually, if you want to ask a question, just quietly and politely as the speech seems to be closing up, please come down to this microphone over here or line up on the corner over here to utilize that microphone. Just come down, line up, and be prepared to ask your questions as soon as we go into that part of it. Those of you who are going to be voting who are voting members of SFYD, we will be doing an endorsement vote at the end of the evening. Just a few things to remember. It's going to take place following the speakers, so it'll happen at the end of the evening. There will be an area set up outside. We'll go through, verify membership, all that kind of fun stuff. Just a reminder, voting members must have attended a previous meeting to this one. So if you came to our holiday party, which counts as a meeting, which was a fun one, or if you came to the forum last month, that qualifies. And of course, you should probably be a registered Democrat and maybe the age of 35 and under. Ballots are set up for instant runoff style. I'll go through a little more detail of what that means later on. And we will be voting for all statewide offices, so governor, lieutenant governor, and all that kind of stuff. So so hopefully you've read up on them before coming out this evening. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our first candidate now. Of course, it's the one who I probably know the least this evening. John Chung is the currently elected to the State Board of Equalization. I don't know a lot about John except for what my friend, the former programs director of SFYD, Christy Young, has been gushing about for the last couple days. But I know he's a great friend to the Los Angeles County Young Democrats, our brothers and sisters down in the South, and was even awarded the CYD Mentor of the Year about 3 years ago by CYD. It's always great to make new friends, John, so I'd like to give you the mic. If you feel like moving around, there's a good lit space there, and there's a good lit space right here, but anywhere over there is shadows. Got 5 minutes, and I'll probably just give you a little sign when it's time for questions. Very good. Can you hear me? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Owen. It's a great honor to be with all of you. I want to thank the San Francisco Young Democrats for this opportunity to join you this evening. As introduced, I'm John Chung. I'm chairman of the California State Board of Equalization. The Board of Equalization is California's elected tax authority. We're one of the 12 constitutional offices in the executive branch of government. And so I have the privilege of serving along with your great representative, the Honorable Betty Yee, who's also here this evening. I am running for state controller because I want to make sure that we expand economic and social and political justice to all Californians. My slogan is that fiscal policy is social policy. And at the Board of Equalization, we make the hard decisions. How do we finance education? How do we finance healthcare? How do we finance transportation? And so we have the real tax treats. We have the big corporations. We make choices fundamentally, such as, do we give oil companies tax breaks? Now, my position has always been no. If you saw this last State of the State, if you saw the positions taken by the president and the governor, this past year we gave between $60 billion to $120 billion, depending on estimates, in subsidies to oil companies. They made $70 billion in profits last year. Do we really need to subsidize oil companies to the tune of $60 billion so they can make $70 billion? And as Owen talked about, we just saw what the president did to the student loan budget. He took away $12.7 billion. So that's the fundamental choices as to fiscal policy. Now, I have a background that is very different than my capable opponents. I am the only one with tax and financial experience. And frankly, a lot of people don't want to delve into the hard work of the Comptroller's Office. You are the state's chief financial officer. So you sit on the Franchise Tax Board and the Board of Equalization, which, as I mentioned, I chair and currently serve on. You make the investment policy for the state. Where do we invest in this country? Where do we invest in this world? And then you also audit. And so my undergraduate degree from the University of South Florida was in finance. My first college was DePaul University, where I won the top accounting scholarship. So I'm the one that actually has the financial principles and standards and understanding to complete the responsibilities of this position. If you're going to send in somebody, you need somebody who actually knows how to audit a book, who knows debits, who knows expenses, who knows cash flow. And then you need somebody who can invest. And then on the tax side, my first job out of the Internal Revenue Service, out of law school, was at the Internal Revenue Service. So I have an understanding of tax policy. In the board's 127-year history, I have more legislative proposals signed into law than any other board member in California history. And it's to expand rights for people, right? We see what this governor, what President Bush wants to do. They want to use the Constitution to undermine rights, to take away benefits for LGBT community, for the Asian community, for Latino community, for the people who are truly struggling. I use the power of the Board of Equalization and as controller to expand our rights. You can walk into my office tomorrow and get free income tax service. And you're thinking, why does that matter? Because in this state, or in my district, 48% of the single women live in poverty. And I want you to imagine the women who are in Louisiana, where after the aftermath of Katrina, where they couldn't write their names down because they didn't have an education, that they didn't have a telephone so they couldn't write a phone number. That's supposed to be the economic engine of our future. So I do the free income taxes so we can do financial literacy, so that we can also pay for education, so that we can change people's lives. Now, Betty's picked it up here. I started to work on the underground economy to find the tax cheats. Steve Wesley's campaigning on it. Another opponent's talking about it. If you go on the website, I started that work when the economy was hot. It's talking about the vision and knowing how to finance California government, because we're talking about a recession in 2 years. So you want somebody who has investment and tax expertise, who's going to stand up against excessive executive compensation, who's going to stop the tax shelters to make sure that the money goes to pay for essential services in this state. And that's why I've been honored on a whole host of different fronts. The elected official of the year by the San Fernando Valley in the first year of office, last year by the Stonewall Democratic Club of Los Angeles, I've done something different talking about tax education. I led the battle to give domestic partners the same tax rights and property taxes as married couples. And not only on top of that, because of my tax expertise, I don't believe in just passing laws that anybody can vote. Since I'm a lawyer, we did seminars. So we did with a whole host of LGBT community organizations to empower people, because that's how you shape and affect change, by being in people's lives. So I will do that as the state controller to make sure that we bring the power to the people so that we can live prosperity and make sure that we live the democratic principles: opportunity, equality, and freedom for all.
Thank you, John. Is this on? Yes. Great. Is there anybody who has any questions for John? Can't let him go. Want to talk for another 5 minutes? No, I got a question for you.
So, John, one of the things that as young people, we've never really lived in a world without Proposition 13, but we've definitely felt the effects. As state controller and as a tax expert, what ideas do you have to address the constraints that it places on the California fiscal system?
Sure. Now, does everybody understand Proposition 13? Okay. Proposition 13, this may be a little bit more technical. If it's too complicated, raise your hand and I'll slow it down. This is where Betty and I's expertise can assist you. Proposition 13 was a ballot measure passed by the voters of California in 1978. And what it did is it rolled back property tax appreciation. To this extent, they would roll back the base rate to 1975. So other jurisdictions have what's called an ad valorem tax. You tax based on the value of the property. And so Proposition changed it this way. Let's say year one, each of you buys a house for $100. Now, the general levy for your property taxes is 1%. There could be some special taxes, for instance, lighting districts, school district taxes, other types of taxes, which would, that would be special levy, so it increases it by over 1%. But the base rate is 1%. Now, let's say year two, the value of your house jumps up to $1,000. Under Proposition 13, they would only recognize a 2% increase in the value of the assessment value of your property. So 2% times, or 1.02 times 100 would take you to $102. Or 102. That would be the assessed value of your property. Everybody with me? I see some people. I'm losing some people. So you would be taxed at 1% of 102. Okay, even though the property is now worth $1,000. They did that so that you wouldn't have this rapid appreciation of prices, but it puts people at disparate places. So if Betty buys a house year one and Mike buys a house year two, they're located next to each other, nearly identical, really having the same value. Mike's taxes, base value would be $1,000 because he bought it in a different year. So it protects people who had their houses for a long period of time. Now, the trouble with a lot of that is in shifting that, they shifted the resources and the funding for those programs. So that's why we have extraordinary struggles maintaining consistency of financing for local programs such as education. So we need to make sure that we look at Proposition 13 so that, and we do that, right? Part of the challenge is how we reassess the property, what standards that we apply. Some of them talking about if we wanted to revamp all of Proposition 13, we would need a constitutional amendment to the California Constitution. But we look at statutory changes. For instance, some of the assessors, some of the more conservative community did not want to recognize the appreciation. They wanted to hold the standards down, which would take away money from essential services in the state. So Betty and I voted against that because we thought that's the wrong way to apply Proposition 13. That's what we do at the Board of Equalization. It's very technical. Like, you can have a whole host of politicians talking about wanting to do stuff. Day in and day out, we look at taxation of programs and where the money goes. The biggest corporations will bring in $1 million attorneys, and they're arguing with Betty and I, right, because they want the massive tax breaks. And they set it up with a tax system where they want you to vote one way, and it's a tax term they call the whipsaw you, right? They'll change the way they operate their methodology is you voted one way so they can avoid taxes. And so that's why you need people that have tax expertise to make sure that we preserve essential revenues to pay for this government building, to pay for library services, to pay for essential health care. And so if you don't have that experience, and I've been there for 10 years, and Betty has extraordinary experience in the finance aspects and the executive branch of government, that's how you can maintain democratic principles.
That was a complicated question. Does anyone have a nice, short, sweet, easy one for him? All right. Thank you so much, John.
Thank you very much.
Not going to answer the State of the Union completely off the top of my head. Next up, I'm going to introduce former Supervisor Mike Nevin, who is running for State Senate in District 8 to replace Jackie Spear, who, as we all know from last month, is running for Lieutenant Governor. Mike's been around for quite a while, serving his community and is a cornerstone of politics down in San Mateo County and along the peninsula. He's a former investigator, city councilman, former mayor of Daly City, and a long time supervisor of San Mateo County. Mike's a friend of mine, and I mean it when I say it. Mike is the epitome of the term public servant. And with that, I'd like to introduce Mike. Tell us a little bit about running for Senate.
He said I have 5 minutes, and he means it when he says that. He said to talk it in the microphone too. I wish we could walk around, but they're taping this, I believe. Oh, you can pull it out if you want. I'll stay in place for a while. It'll be okay. I'm born and raised in San Francisco. Spent my life there until, of course, I was married at 24 years old, and I've lived ever since in Westlake. So I'm from the peninsula, and people tend to think of me as a supervisor in Redwood City, but I really never left San Francisco in that I'm just a couple blocks out of San Francisco in Daly City's Westlake district, where I raised my 3 children. The district, by the way, I was 10 years on the council, 12 years on the Board of Supervisors, and 3 years on the Daly City Planning Commission. This District 8, Jackie Spear's district, is 55% in San Mateo County, 45% in the western portion of San Francisco County. There's 30,000 more Democrats in San Mateo County than there are in the San Francisco portion of the district. We think that's an advantage to us who have been reelected time and time again in San Mateo County over a quarter century. I have some key endorsements that I'm very proud of, and it took me a lifetime of public service to build this kind of trust. But endorsements, they say, don't mean everything, except when there's a lot of them. And in this case, Senator Feinstein has endorsed us, Senator Boxer, Nancy Pelosi, Tom Lantos, Anna Eshoo, Jackie Spear, whose seat it is, obviously, Supervisor Fiona Ma, Phil Ting, Norman Yee, Michaela Alioto-Peer, Sophie Maxwell, Chris Daly. Quickly, some of the issues that I'm most proud of in my service as a supervisor, where I feel I'm progressive, especially having come from a law enforcement background. But I joined Jackie Spear in her fight for privacy, financial privacy. We told the banks for 3 years Jackie tried to get a bill passed in California, and it never worked. And I was able, with my colleagues, to pass the first ordinance in the United States regarding financial privacy. And that ordinance said that you could not use our information, any of our information that the bank has on us, and give it to a third party without our permission. As simple as that. We were the first in the United States to do it. We told our story on 60 Minutes not too long ago. And as you know, Jackie Spear then passed her bill after San Mateo County being the first in California to do it. I also was very proud of my work with medicinal marijuana. I was absolutely satisfied that the substance within marijuana needed to be proven one way or another if it did not satisfy appetite problems, nausea problems in patients suffering from AIDS, cancer, and other diseases. Testimony to me from great friends was that it was the only thing that stopped the nausea, gave them the ability to eat at the last portion of their lives. And we have in San Mateo County today a clinical trials that I started with Dr. Dennis Zrelski, a clinical trials with the United States government where we're giving the substance marijuana to patients. And we're trying to prove once and for all at the end of this year that yes, marijuana should be sold at any pharmacy in America and considered a pharmaceutical prescribed by doctors throughout this country, and that it should be the law of the land. I'm very proud of that work in marijuana. I saved the San Mateo Health Plan, which is for the indigent. When it was going to go under, it was one of 5 health plans in the state of California. We were able to save that and keep that alive and well for people who needed us the most. I also was a leader in starting to create a parks district in San Mateo County that was passed by the legislators, signed by the governor, where San Mateo County is going to be able, if the voters pass it, spend a quarter cents on parks so that we save our great parks in a beautiful county. Issues like finding affordable statewide universal health plan, single pay health plan is a goal of mine when I get to Sacramento. I agree with Sheila Kuehl. Finding incentives for affordable housing is absolutely essential, and transportation and housing has been an expertise of mine since becoming a supervisor in San Mateo County. And I look out and I see that my time is up. I'll quit. Well, I'm almost finished anyway. But the whole idea of balancing money in Sacramento and to stop stealing Prop 98 money, for example, for education, stop stealing Prop 42 money for transportation. When people vote for monies and expenditures, they need it to go where it was supposed to go. We can't afford any longer to treat money the way we do in the governor's office and in the legislature. And those are going to be goals of mine when I get there, to protect education, to protect the level of education, and to no longer be 46th in the United States when it comes to education. Our students, our kids deserve much better.
All right, got a number of people ready to ask a few questions of you. So on both sides, I hope everyone will try to keep it nice and short and sweet, so that we already all know about Prop 13. So fortunately, we won't have to repeat that one.
Hi. A couple of years ago, San Francisco voters passed Prop H, a police reform initiative which this club endorsed and I personally worked very hard on. I know that you were a board member of the San Francisco Police Officers Association, which is our principal opponent. So I wanted to know your personal stand on Prop H. What have you done?
Prop 8, is it? Or
Prop
H?
H.
What does it say? What does Prop 8 say?
Basically, it reformed the police commission.
Oh, yeah. The new makeup of the police commission?
Right. And also, as a board member of the Police Officers Association, what have you done to address problems of police brutality, police abuse, and in light of some of the recent Chronicle headlines, what more work on the issue needs to be done at this point?
Well, I agree with Proposition H, as a matter of fact, a larger commission so that we could look at issues like that. I also spent in my career about 4 years in the Internal Affairs Bureau investigating police officers accused of wrongdoing. So I used my expertise as an inspector, as an investigator, and was unafraid to take on tough investigations like I did during that time. And I think those were some of the best years in my police career. Myself directly as a supervisor in San Mateo County, my role was a little different in that I was a legislator rather than a mayor of a city, for example. And we have an elected sheriff in San Mateo County that is a lot different than an appointed chief of police. I got very involved in the sheriff's department when it came to giving service and help to a community that really needed it, like East Palo Alto. I got in there, rolled up my sleeves, and worked with the East Palo Alto Police Department, and that city now stands alone economically and no longer needs the help it got that we were supportive of from the county of San Mateo. But direct involvement with a police department, I have not had the opportunity to do that as a legislator in San Mateo County. A strong advocate of good, responsible law enforcement. What responsible law enforcement means within the guidelines and the laws of the land, and not to go anywhere near or further when it comes to excessive force or some of the things that we read about that is tragic in today's society.
My name is Jeremy Friedlander, and as you can see, I'm not a young Democrat. I'm
one of you, Jeremy. I got the same color hair.
We have something in common. I am a precinct captain in this district. My question is pretty simple. If you're elected, a year after you're elected, how can we specifically evaluate what you've done? What criteria should we use? Specific criteria should we use 1 year into your term to evaluate how you've performed?
I think that'd be a little tough to do. I think probably 2 years would probably be more realistic. It takes a few months to find out where you are up there, what committees you get on. I hope to be involved in the mentally ill healthcare somewhere. I forgot to even mention that, but I was very proud of supporting schizophrenia patients when I was almost recalled out of office for doing so for a neighborhood that desperately was against independent living for the mentally ill. That's where government belongs, where people need us the most. So I'd look to committees like transportation and housing, because I've been there and I feel like I'm an expert in that area. The mentally ill and healthcare in general, and the passage of the universal healthcare bill all goes into play of what my plans are, and then coupling, if you will, marrying the issues of making affordable housing available, especially near and around transit, will be a #1 goal of mine when I get to Sacramento. I think a year is probably too short, but I think in 2 years you could see the direction we're moving in, and I don't want to be just one of those that votes on the floor of the Senate and asks the people I voted for a check the same day. I want to be one of those dozen go-to leaders in Sacramento that carry the bill through the process, don't milk it down, and make it worthy of a gubernatorial signature.
Time for one more question. I'm not counting.
Hi, my name is Jennifer. One of the things in your speech was regarding housing. As someone who lives in San Francisco and rents and would like someday, should I win the lottery, to be able to buy in San Francisco. You had said that you had a program to increase affordable housing. Mm-hmm. Can you give us an idea of a practicable way for that to happen? One
of the problems about housing is supply and demand. It doesn't exist. We protect, balances between the economy and the environment. Protect the coast, protect the redwoods, yet let California sprawl. And we lose those open spaces throughout Northern California. I think we have to build housing for workers, for people, for young people, in and around transit. First of all, we still have to loop the bay with transportation. It's a tragedy we didn't do it 40 years ago, and we still have to work to do that. A system, whether it's BART or otherwise, that circles the bay and connects. It's all about seamless connectivity and letting people live on the right-of-way. In San Mateo County, we own the Caltrain right-of-way. We own the property. I hope to build housing, highly clustered, townhouse-type housing, at every stop, at every station along the Caltrain line that we can do it. And San Francisco's getting a brand new neighborhood of 3,600 units, 30% affordable at Transbay Terminal, which I've chaired these last 5 years.
All right. Next up, I'd like to introduce the Honorable Betty Yee. She's currently serving as our District State Board of Equalization member. She ascended to this post when State Senator Carol Migden was elected to the Senate a year and a half ago, about a year ago. So she was second in command at the time, and she's been working in California politics and finance for a very long time. Fortunately for her, at least as far as I still know, she's unopposed. So that's lucky, right? But she is our gal. She is our candidate for this job, and we're very proud of her. So I want to give Betty some time to come up, tell us about what she's doing, what she's planning to do, and you can ask a few questions.
Thanks very much, Owen. It's a pleasure to be before you this evening. my questionnaire is on the table, and I really don't want to rehash what's on my questionnaire, but I want to just give you a little bit of insight in terms of why I am in the job I'm in and why I chose this path. But really, more importantly, as I look out at all of you, it's really the reason why I've chosen a career in public service. And it's really about making a difference in the lives of people who really don't have a political voice yet fully developed. And a large part of why I'm in office is to try to help develop that voice for those who don't have one that's fully heard. In terms of my experience, Owen is right. I've been a fiscal policy wonk for a good part of 20 years of my life. And budgets and taxes aren't exactly the sexiest subject, but let me tell you, fiscal policy drives everything in life. And wherever the money is usually where a lot of important decisions get made. And so I take the job very seriously. I had the opportunity to serve under Governor Gray Davis as his budget director, and so I actually can tell you about the state budget in my sleep. I've had the opportunity to develop 4 of them during my tenure with the governor. But it is a fascinating process. If you are not enticed by it, you should try to understand it, because it is where a lot of opportunities lie in terms of funding for important services like higher education, affordable housing, and environmental protection. But it's essentially a policy statement about what our priorities are for California when you look at a budget. And unfortunately, for both our current governor and for the president of our country right now, the priorities are pretty misplaced. I chose to pursue this opportunity when Carol Mignon was elected to the Senate because at the time, even though I had not ever saw myself being in elective office, I have worked for a lot of elected officials, have worked on a lot of campaigns, have mentored a lot of people in terms of coming into public service and into elective office. And I thought, my gosh, I better start putting my money where my mouth has been. And it's an opportunity that I think really is one that I could not pass up and where I could really make a difference. And I have the tremendous opportunity of serving with John Chung, and he has been a wonderful mentor to me on the board. On the board, we essentially are probably the most important stewards of the state's revenues in terms of the rulings that we make on the tax appeals that come before us, and also in terms of who ought to pay taxes. Whenever there's a new program put in place, we are the ones that determine what businesses and individuals ought to be subject to the new tax, and so we take that responsibility seriously. In terms of accomplishments, I look at this job as really being about how do we in government really make lives easier, make life easier for those that have to comply with all of the state requirements and laws. And generally, for the most part, the majority of folks that come before the board with an appeal aren't going to have all that easy of a time getting a ruling in their favor. There is a process that happens prior to their appearing before the board, and we do try to resolve disputes at the lowest possible level. But when it comes to the board, oftentimes it's to seek an interpretation by the members of the board, or it is the last appeal opportunity for the taxpayer. Now, as far as the job itself, you might think taxes are boring, but we actually have made a number of different important rulings. And more recently, on the issue of medical marijuana, we have tried to level the playing field with respect to those cannabis clubs that have actually registered with the board and are actually collecting and remitting sales tax to the state. Really want to be recognized as legitimate businesses, and yet we know there are some clubs that actually want to do business underground. And we did try to level the playing field by essentially saying, any person who comes and wants to apply for a seller's permit, we will issue it to you, and you don't have to disclose the nature of your saleable activity. The concern there was that the feds are still very much on the backs of those that operate these clubs. They will be the first to come in and raid anyone that outs themselves by identifying what they actually sell. So we were able to do that within the last year, and I feel very good about that, and I think there are clubs stepping up to the plate. Now, as far as the kind of my political orientation and my thoughts about my role in elective office, and I want to just conclude with this. As I see my role, I have a personal commitment to help develop the next generation of leadership. And when you look at where the demographics of the state are going, by the year 2020, we will be a Latino majority population in California. We will have an aging electorate, and yet we are doing nothing in terms of engaging our ethnic minority communities, our young community, our youth, to really think about being more engaged in the political process. And for me, I have a personal commitment, and any of you who have any desire to learn about tax policy, please come see me. I really want to develop this next generation of young people to step into these roles. It is very, very important work, and I think it's incumbent upon each of us, John, myself, others in public office, to really provide those opportunities for young people so that they can have meaningful experience and be able to also make a contribution for the future of this state. So that's what I'm about. That's why I'm doing this. Aside from the fact that I feel I'm qualified, I do want to look at working with all of you and developing this next generation of leadership for the state of California. Thank you.
Do you have any questions for Betty Yee? Come on, Ben.
A question for you, Julie Sue, Chair of the API Caucus for the California Democratic Party. We all know that we're in such a healthcare crisis right now, and recently you initiated an audit of some of our California hospitals with excessive CEO compensation and what these hospitals, what share they've done, if anything, on charitable care. Could you give a status on the audit?
Sure. We actually accelerated the audits that we do periodically every 3 years of those that claim a property tax exemption because they are nonprofit. And what sparked the acceleration of looking at hospitals across the board was a lot of news about a year ago with respect to the high levels of compensation by CEOs of these nonprofit hospitals. Many of you know who they are. It's the likes of CPMC here in San Francisco. Essentially, the Sutter Health chain got the most publicity over the last year. But our concern is really from a statewide policy aspect, and that is if these CEOs are getting this type of compensation, what is happening with respect to the profits that they are getting? Are they actually being reinvested into providing charitable care and actually carrying out the purpose for which they are currently claiming the exemption? And that is our job. We will determine that. We are in the process now of looking at the financials that have been submitted by these hospitals. To no surprise, they aren't the most complete set of information, and so we're doing a lot of back and forth to actually get the information, but I'm hopeful we can come to a conclusion over the next 6 to 9 months.
Any other questions? Thank you so much.
Thank
Betty.
you very much.
Cutting her off easy. All right, our next candidate I'm very honored to introduce. Not every day that we can say we have a former governor and a current mayor and a presidential candidate several times over in our midst. In fact, when coming up with what I wanted to say for this introduction, it was really easy. I was just able to look at Mayor Jerry Brown's list of things that he's run for and won, and been able to put it in the perspective of a young Democrat here today. He was governor when I was born. He ran for president, I think, the second time when I was in preschool. Ran for the U.S. Senate when I was in kindergarten. Ran for president again when I was in junior high. One of my favorite ones is that he he did a liberal talk radio show when I was on my way into college, well before Will and Willie Brown got their show on Quake Radio. He tried to take on Rush Limbaugh. Tough job. Appreciated that when I was in college. I used to have to listen to that guy when I was in the car learning to drive. Very bad. And most recently, since I came into adulthood and out of the college realm, he became mayor of Oakland. So you've been all over the place, Mayor Jerry Brown, and appreciate your energy. So welcome to the Forever Young Democrats, Mr. Mayor, and I'd love to hear about your race for Attorney General.
West Portal here? Nobody from West Portal. How about St. Brendan? How about SI? SI, okay. I get one vote for that. I've used up 1 minute, so that wasn't very effective. So, Attorney General. Yeah, I'm glad you gave my history here. I've had a lot of history. Some people would call it checkered. I call it pretty interesting, varied, diverse, if you want to use that word. And I will say that what I've tried to do is to do what other people haven't done. And when I used to go to the office of governor, I'd say, you know what? what happened. Now, what's going to happen if I don't do anything? That's like 98%. So I'll forget about that and let somebody else worry about it. And what could happen by virtue of something really new or something that I might bring to bear? And out of that, I created a farm labor law, the Conservation Corps, the 55% tax credit for solar installations, a whole bunch of things that came forward. So I tried to bring an innovative approach to any responsibility that I've had. The Attorney General is not the governor, not the legislature. So we're not a big policy maker in that big global sense. The Attorney General is the lawyer for the people, the people's lawyer. And there's really just a couple of powers. One power is to sue people. That's one I'm going to enjoy, because I like to sue people. One of the reasons why you should support me. So if I sue you, at least you can call me, and I'll see what we can do. So suing people, that's the first thing. Second thing you do is you give advice to the governor, to all the departments. There's probably 60 departments of state government, from fish and game, to highways, to banking, to insurance, consumer affairs, all sorts of things. Medical board, chiropractic board, I mean, all sorts of governmental bodies and departments look to the Attorney General and his or her deputies for advice. And you need a lot of advice these days, because we have tens of thousands of laws. In fact, I'm not even sure how many we have. Maybe Joe Dunn knows. He's up there. We probably have 100,000 laws, don't we? So we have enough laws that a person whose job it is to interpret and enforce them has quite a job. And the way you enforce them, of course, is to go into Superior Court and bring suits. The way you interpret them is to write opinions or to tell people you can do this, but you can't do that. So that's the essential power, is the lawyer. And I think, having been governor and secretary of state, member of the College Board of Trustees in Los Angeles, and as mayor, local level, local government perspective, I have a substantive experience on which to base legal advice that will be called upon from the Attorney General's office. Now, if you ask me, besides, so you've got opinions to offer, you have lawsuits to bring, and then, of course, you have the ability to pontificate. Everybody has that. But the Attorney General has a big bully pulpit because he has such a big stick that he carries. So what would I want to do with all that? Well, first thing, of course, we want the rule of law. And in the rule of law, we have a lot of environmental laws about toxics, about energy, about our public trust, the habitat, the rivers, the food, pesticides. And we know, if we really look at things, that us, the whole system that we're a part of, is screwing up the very basis of life. The biochemical balances that make life possible for not only humans, but other species are being degraded, undermined, and disrupted. And as Attorney General, I will make it a principal responsibility and object of my work is to enforce the laws in an imaginative, forceful way to realign how we conduct ourselves in accordance with the biochemical rules, because we can mock them but, to our detriment. So we're on a collision course with the environment, with nature. The toxic load in this room, just the amount of toxics that we contain in our bodies reaches toxic levels. So there's a lot to be done on the environmental front. And I don't think there's ever been a chief executive with a stronger environmental record. As mayor of Oakland, Oakland has become among the top 10 clean cities in the country. Second thing in the rule of law is holding everybody to account. We have a president who thinks he is above the law. And I spoke out against the war in Iraq when it started and continuously. When we have a president who says, I can declare somebody a non-person, they are no longer entitled to any protection of law. Not the Geneva Convention, not the 14th Amendment, not the American Constitution. That is what has happened. For the first time in American history, a chief executive has said, we can define a category of people who have no rights. Very dangerous. Now, while the Attorney General of California can't stop the president, I do believe the Attorney General can join with other attorneys general throughout the state to advance the cause of respect for the law, for human rights, for treaties, and for the laws that make our society a civilized and tolerant place. So, respecting the law, fighting to protect the environment, fighting for the underdog, and of course, fashioning imaginative lawsuits to enforce the laws. We have a law that says equal education. Well, is that being enforced? Is there equal education when some schools have a fraction of the achievement than others? I don't think so. Same is true in the environment, true for workers' rights. It's true on a broad front. And as your Attorney General, I would represent the people, and I would do it in a very forceful, hopefully courageous way with all of your support. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions? Oh, you must.
I have a question about education. I used to be a school teacher, and I have a colleague who recently published a book about education policy. And he mentioned to me a couple months ago that you, in his estimation, have thought deeply about education policy. And I wonder, what specific ideas do you have about things that you could do as Attorney General to change the deplorable state of education, public education in the state of California? Thank you.
Well, education is deplorable in many different respects. It's deplorable in that kids from poor families do not get the fair shake that people from affluent families. And if you read the test scores, they track almost perfectly with the income of the neighborhood and the family. So there's a gross inequality that flows from historic patterns of segregation and increasing economic inequality. That's one thing. But then there's another aspect that affects everybody, rich and poor, and that is the widespread mediocrity and standardization and lack of imagination in education as well. The change that's gone on just in the last 50 years, education is becoming very quantitative, very standardized. You probably can't believe it, but in 1978, the regents for the first time entertained the proposition that SAT scores were relevant for admission to UC. Up to that time, they weren't required. And more, the testing mania goes on. Kids today in grammar school are now tested at the level of the state bar exam. I mean, it's incredible the amount of precise measuring of people along these quantitative standards. And where is creativity? Where is original thinking? And we're all different. We have different learning approaches. We have different things. Some people are good at one thing, somebody's good at the other. We destroyed vocational education. We say everybody's got to learn something. Well, I'll tell you something. I got a D in physics, I got a D in geometry, and I got elected governor at the age of 36. And I don't need to know the Pythagorean theorem, even though that's the only damn thing I did learn in geometry. And the quadratic equation. How many people here can explain to me the quadratic equation? Probably a handful. You could. But can you use it? Even if you could say it, can you use it? And I still can't. And I got an A in algebra, but I can't figure out. I've gone back and said, can I figure this thing out? No, I can't. And most of what you learn, you don't need. And a lot of the restrictions are distorting the real creativity of our society. So it's unequal, and it's very destructive. And the values that are being embedded are basically consumer values to commodify our lives and distort the real possibilities of what it is to be a human being. So my critique of education is it's not diverse enough, it's not decentralized enough, it's not critical enough, and it's not imaginative enough. And I know that doesn't always fit into the most narrow-minded left view of the world, because I think charter schools are a good idea. I think there should be less central control. I think there should be more freedom. And that's not the way we're going. We're going to more federal control, no child left behind, more state control, more district control, and I think that's not the way we grow up. We're organizing our lives. You got to belong to a soccer team. You got to have your little resume. All this shit that you got to have today, you didn't have to have before. And human beings should not be put into this commodified mold, which is now modern education. So I think we need more of a revolutionary disruption of the way things are, because we're headed toward the abyss, and education is facilitating the acceleration.
Mayor, I'd love to get 2 more questions in for you, but we're just going to, as far as time, make them nice.
I don't want any more questions. I'm ready to stop.
As you said, the Attorney General is in charge of enforcing and interpreting and helping with the law. And as you said, there's 10,000, 100,000, 19,000, lots of little laws. And I was just wondering what your background in law
was. Well, I went to the best law school in the United States, which is called Yale. And I got in because the Chief Justice of California, Roger Traynor, wrote me a letter and said I was going to be a great scholar. I don't know if that's because my father made him Chief Justice, but it helped. So don't ever minimize relationships. But anyway, I did get into Yale Law School. I wasn't at the top of my class, but I learned a hell of a lot. So I went to a great law school with great colleagues, great professors. I worked as a law clerk, legal assistant to Justice Matthew Tabriner, another judge my father appointed, I might tell you, at the California Supreme Court, a very progressive judge, wonderful man, wrote a lot of very important opinions. Then I practiced law in a business law firm in Southern California for about 4 years. Then I got a little tired of practicing law because you had to do your hours out at the 10th of an hour. I wasn't very good at that. So I ran for Secretary of State, and then I had a few laws to enforce there, election laws, for example. I sued Richard Nixon, proved the backdated. I'll tell you what I did. I proved that Richard Nixon's lawyer, a guy from Orange County, by the way, a man by the name of DeMarco, backdated the deed of Nixon's official papers. Backdated it by 1 year, so Nixon could avail himself of a tax break that had been recently eliminated by Congress. And he thereby deprived the federal government of about $450,000. I found that out because he did it with the benefit of a notary public who I had commissioned as Secretary of State. And so I created a hearing to talk about using the power of law. We did an inquiry into the notary public, and we found out the typewriter he used was an IBM Selectric that was not manufactured at the time of the so-called deed of trust. So that's something I did. I also appeared before the California Supreme Court. I sued 3 oil companies, Standard, Oil, and Mobil, and won an action against them for concealing their campaign donations. I argued that case myself. Then I became governor. I signed 10,000 bills. I read at least half of them. So, and the arguments pro and con, I think that'll give me something. I practiced a little law when I left, and now I've been a mayor for 8 years, or 7 years. Seems like 8. And we have lots of laws, lots of ordinances. We get sued every week. We pay out all the time for people who slip on the sidewalk, who get harassed by the police or our employees. I've learned a great deal in this job, and I am ready to be your lawyer.
Mayor, I'm going to take privilege as president of the organization and ask one more question, and it's going to be my question.
Okay.
Only question I've asked in all this, even though it goes way over time.
We stimulated a lot of...
Yeah, I got a lot of stimulation going on.
All right.
Speaking of which, this question basically defines my personal relationship with the current Attorney General. It's very near and dear to my heart. How would you have dealt differently and better, I hope, with the suit that came up around Mayor Gavin Newsom and the marriage stuff that was happening here in San Francisco 2 years ago?
Well, that's a very good question. I shouldn't have let you ask that question. But I will tell you, the law that the Supreme Court, Newsom purported to overrule an existing law in California. And I purported to do that myself. I didn't, but some people I put on the Alcohol and Beverage Appeal Board, where they ruled fair pricing, even though it was the law of California, that you could require retail establishments to set the price of food. And this was the rule. but the people I put on the Alcohol Beverage Appeal Board were big drinkers, and they like to get their booze cheaper. And so they ruled 3-0 on this board, administrative board, that the law setting those prices and setting them high was illegal, unconstitutional. And so the California legislature, before Joe Dunn got there, passed a bill and said only a court of appeals, it was signed by the governor, only the Court of Appeals can declare a statute of California unconstitutional. So not if you're a mayor, not if you're a superior court, and certainly not if you're an administrative agency. You have to allow this to go through the normal process. So when you're talking about the right to marriage, you're talking about a right that can only find its existence and protection in a framework of law. And under our framework of law, we have a separation of powers. The legislature makes the laws, the governor gets to sign or veto and then has to enforce them. The courts interpret them, and the Attorney General is the lawyer for the people. And then on defending our statutes, and then there are other people who can come and sue the state and contest these things. But in order for the system to work, each person has to play their separate role. We don't want anyone to take over the power of some other branch of government. So I think in that sense, Lockyer has been following his ethical and legal responsibility. It's not that you have to agree with the position he's upholding, but as long as we have the statute on the books, it's the job of the Attorney General to defend it. Because in the adversarial system, unlike what they have in Europe, you need one person on one side, another person on the other side, and then you have a judge or a jury, and they make up their mind. But if you don't have two sides making an adversarial inquiry and combat even to illuminate the truth, then our system breaks down. And so I think in this instance, Lockyer, I think, has acted according to the law and according to the way we have created our framework of law.
All right, only 2 candidates to go. Next up, I want to introduce the second candidate we have here tonight for the position of State Controller, Senator Joe Dunn of Orange County, which always creates a predicament in my mind. How can there be a liberal Democratic senator in Orange County? That's right, he rocks. So as far as I know, he's doing a great thing in rocking the Democrats who are down in Southern California. I hear a whole lot about from Tim Steed, who's on SFYD with us, about his big claim to fame, something about Enron. And when Tim talks about it, all I hear is Enron, 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 Enron. But I want to give Joe a moment to talk to everybody about his campaign. And you got 5 minutes. And
thank you very, very much, Owen. And Owen, Nicole, to the entire board, thank you very much, John. Great to see you, Betty. Great to see you. And Mr. Mayor, he's already departed. First of all, let me start where I think all of us who hold public office should start, which is something I think you rarely hear from us, and that is a thank you. Because in 1998, I'm going to talk about it in a minute, we had a very unexpected outcome in Orange County, truly. A lot of that is owed to the Young Democrats, not just in Orange County, but throughout California, who came to that race in 1998, worked that race, and through that work, we were successful in putting a Democrat in office in Orange County. So I want to say, before I say anything else, thank you for the friendship, for the support along the way, because without you, I wouldn't be standing in front of you here tonight. I know that, I recognize that. Thank you very much. Now I want to make a statement. And that statement is something that probably each of us in this room agree with. And that is, for the Democratic office holders, in not only the state of California, in this nation, there is only but a handful that really fit that definition of leader or leadership. It's something that we all need desperately. Someone who will stand up proudly as a Democrat, despite the consequences, knows what they stand for, and will stay standing for those principles, despite the risks to that individual. So what I want to talk about tonight is not promised leadership, which you get from every candidate that stands in front of you. I want to talk about proven leadership. Prior to my election to the state senate in 1998, which was my first run for political office, I practiced law for 20 years. You heard the candidate, Mr. Mayor, for AG. I practiced in the courtrooms of this state and this nation. I took on the pharmaceutical industry. I was one of the lead counsel against the tobacco industry back in the mid-1990s. I still am active in one case. For those of you who follow the development of nuclear technology in this country, you'll know the Hanford nuclear site up in Washington State, the most contaminated site in the world. I represent 2,000 residents in the surrounding communities that were poisoned through the release of iodine-131 from that facility between the late 1940s and the early 1970s. I'm still active in that case. It's been going on for 15 years. I'm a real live lawyer. I stood in real live courtrooms, and I fought real live battles against some really powerful influences. That's what I tried to do in the trial. We're often called the Harley Davidson drivers in the legal profession, and we love that label. Thank you very much. In 1998, I decided to run for political office, not because I didn't like the practice of law. I did. Loved it. I always wanted to try my hand in public service. I was a trial lawyer Democrat, announcing to the world that he was going to run for office. And of all places, Orange County, California, everybody said, great, that's going to be a fair election. Lo and behold, we won. 2 percentage points in 1998. We knocked off the Republican minority leader at that time. Nobody gave us a chance. A guy by the name of Rob Hurt, those who follow legislative history. It is still recognized as the greatest upset in legislative history in the state of California. I wish I could claim full credit. There's a lot of votes. And in 2002, during my re-election, I won by over 35 points. In 2002. But wait a minute, Joe. For those of us from San Francisco, that could be easy. You pretended you were Republican, right? No, wrong. I'm one of the most progressive votes in the entire California state legislature. And I did it proudly, and every vote I cast on the progressive end of the spectrum was done by putting my political career on the line every single day. There's not another candidate that can come before you and tell you that. Not a one. When I gave life to Mark Leno's bill on marriage equality when it died in the Assembly, that was in my committee, the Senate Judiciary Committee that I chair. It was my committee that brought that bill back to life. I was threatened with a recall in my district when I brought that bill back to life. Didn't matter. Go ahead, recall me, because I'm not compromising my principles. Remember when we did the workers' compensation debate? Remember when we did workers' compensation? I know many of you don't follow this. This was a great debate 2 years ago, in which we ultimately changed workers' compensation. The way injured workers are compensated for their injuries. And unfortunately, that quote-unquote reform package pushed by Arnold Schwarzenegger was balanced on the back of injured workers. Those are the ones who lost. I was the only Democrat to stand up and say no to a workers' compensation reform that's balanced on the back of injured workers, with insurance carriers getting away scot-free. I was threatened with a recall in my district in Orange County, but I didn't care. I could have done the safe route and said, you know what, most of my other Democrats are going with that and voting aye. I'm one of basically a lone no vote. It didn't matter. It was principle. What I stood for. I represent injured workers. I'm not going to sell them down the river because it's easy. No, I put my career on the line and said no. Well, let me give you one more example. What I'm most proud of. Now it's over 7 years working in the California legislature. I chaired the investigation committee into the energy crisis in California. Now, you all know when politicians do investigations, they're one-day affairs, primarily designed to put the politician on the front page of the newspaper the next day. That's not what that investigation was. It was 2.5 years long, 35 hearings. We served hundreds of subpoenas. We deposed thousands of individuals during that investigation. It was the first time the California legislature had served subpoenas in over 100 years. The first time it found anybody in contempt in over 100 years. Who did we find in contempt? Not once, but twice. Enron. Enron when they were still wearing the corporate white hat, not the black hat they're wearing now. When it was unpopular to find them in contempt. I'm the only candidate that can stand before you to tell you that due to his investigation, I got sued by Enron. When they called me the day before and said, sorry, Senator, we're going to have to sue you to stop your investigation, I said, no problem. Make sure you spell it right. D-U-N-N. Make me the lead defendant. Thank you very much. We beat them in court and continued that investigation. And a lot of the evidence that you're now seeing coming out in the trial of Ken Lay and Jeff Skilling, guess what? It came from our investigation. Remember the infamous memorandum of Fat Boy and Death Star? That was from our investigation. But you know what? That investigation wasn't easy. Because, oh yeah, we took on some enemies. But you know what? It's easy to take on enemies. We had to take on some friends, too. this day, Gray Davis will tell you, the person that angered him most was Joe Dunn. Because we went after him on his bogus solution to the energy crisis. We went after friends and foes alike to get to the truth. We got there. I'm almost there. Almost there. The term limits has now caught up. It's time to move on and run for state control. With great support by none other than Senator John Burton, who is the chair of our campaign committee for control. Support across this nation. Across the nation. I control. Okay. For the same reason I told you to end the story. An elderly woman listened to my description of controller the other day, and she said, "Oh, Senator, you know what? You're going to be California's money top." You know what? Absolutely right. Hire consultants and they don't come up with She was right. What it takes to be the controller of the state of California is that same willingness, that same dedication, that same independence, that same leadership. Standing up to friends and foe alike when we investigated Enron. Roll up our sleeves, follow the money, and make sure it gets to places it's intended. Transportation, education, environmental protection. All of the issues we hold near and dear. We know that our dollars aren't getting to the right place. The audit power of the Controller's Office has never been utilized to its full extent. We intend to do that. The professional investigators, I'm proud of it. Proved it in the Senate, proved it in the Controller's Office, and it's not promised leadership. Proven leadership. I'm the only one who laid my political job on the line for what I passed. I'm proud of that.
Great. We have a couple questions for you.
Hi. My question was actually going to be, why are you running for controller, which you just addressed there at the end. But I was actually hoping you
Get
could
another
talk.
5 minutes on it? No,
Yeah. Just talk a little bit more about why you chose controller in particular and what you do hope to accomplish by using the office to its full extent.
Be happy to. I touched upon it, but let me expand upon it a little bit. And thank you very, very much for the question. I'm sure John explained that for those who are not familiar with the Controller's Office, because not any of us in this race believe that come election day that everybody's going to wake up in California and go, "God, I can't wait to go vote for controller." We know that's not going to happen. But it's probably the third most powerful seat in the entire state of California behind governor and AG because of the power of that office. Not only its administrative power of writing the checks to make sure the money gets to the places, education, transportation, that we believe in, but the other powers associated with that office, including in the office itself and the boards and commission that the controller sits on. CalPERS. You care about a decent retirement system for society? Better if you're going to be serving on CalPERS and CalSTRS. It's a critical issue for society. The decisions that are made there affect everybody, not just public employees, but in the private sector as well too. You care about environmental issues? The controller sits on numerous boards and commissions that are critical to environmental protection. But fundamentally, our emphasis is going to be on the audit power of the controller's office. Because that power has always been underutilized. To follow every single dollar. We have $100 billion every year going out of the state budget. You know doggone well that not every dollar is getting where it belongs. The games that can be played in environmental protection, where we say we're doing it, but we're not really. We're getting dollars into the classroom, but we're really not. We're getting dollars into transportation, we're really not. It's the controller's office that has the ability to effectively follow and trace those dollars and ensure it's going to the dependent job. That's where we're going to emphasize. That requires an independence and a level of leadership, as I mentioned before, to take on friends and foe alike and simply stand for what's right. I always believe what's right is the best doggone policy.
Senator Dunn, I was born in 1977, and so I think, like a lot of people in this room, we've never known at California that it wasn't covered by Proposition 13. As you roll as the Controller's Office, how would that affect your job, and what ideas do you have to address it?
Proposition 13, one of the holy grail issues for California politics, as you all know. Proposition 13 was wildly popular to this day in many quarters. The Proposition 13 has had some deadly effects in California. When will it change? It will probably change by most experts' analysis when the World War II generation has passed on. going to be generational of all future children. Am I an advocate that we all pay high property taxes? Of course. But there are some unfairnesses to Proposition 13 that has constrained the ability of the people of California to do what they need to do with their governmental institutions. That's something we have to recognize. We have to be real. What are the solutions? There are many proposals. I can't stand before you here to tell you what's right or what's wrong. But we need to honestly debate them because of the unfairness. A young couple that's trying to buy a house to raise a family, due to the effect of Proposition 13, can't buy it. Yet the neighboring house, they could have, if they've been living in it for 35 years. It's your generation that is being impacted most by Proposition 13. And there has to be some thinking to make sure your generation has a fair shot with the previous generation.
Thank you, Senator. That's all the time we have.
You got it, Owen. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate the time, for the friendship, support. John?
We have just one candidate left. I want to welcome up to the front Assembly members Speaker Pro Tem Leland Yee, who has been serving for the last almost 4 years as the Assembly member for the west side of San Francisco. Before that, he served as the supervisor, I believe, in the Sunset District. Leland Yee is well known for feng shui in the Capitol and video game legislation. But he's a serious candidate running for the serious office of state senator for the western half of San Francisco. So I'll hand over the mic, and Leland, you're on fire.
Thank you very much. First off, I'm going to try to be quick because I know it's been a long night, and I want to make sure that you don't fall asleep when I'm talking. Okay, so first off, like the good senator said, a lot of individuals talk about doing. They talk about a lot of things, but whether or not they've actually done anything is a whole other story. I've spent 8 years on the Board of Education, 6 years on the Board of Supervisors, and then 4 years in the California State Assembly in the last several years as the Speaker Pro Tem, the number 2 position in the Capitol. And I guess for me, what really sort of signal that I've been really upsetting some people is when I ran for re-election for the San Francisco Board of Supervisors. When I ran for the second time for the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, there were business interests that were loading up their guns to the tune of $1 million. $1 million to come after me. And the question I sort of continued to ask was, what did I do wrong? And I think that when you look at my record, what I did wrong was I supported neighborhoods. I supported mom and pop stores. I did not want chain stores to come into our neighborhoods in San Francisco and destroy our character. I dare to somehow support a member of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors who happened to be gay, happened to be a little bit more progressive. I dared to go ahead and support Tom Amiano as board president. And after that particular fight, after spending $1 million against me, I decided that it was extremely important that all of us, not just myself, but all of us, really stand up for what you really believe. And so in the last election, in the special election, I stepped up to the plate. When the governor put in measures to go after education, after women's right to choose, when he went after working class people, and when he went after education, I stepped up to the plate to the tune of $100,000 of my own money. Rather than using those dollars for my campaign, I thought about you, your education. I thought about your environment. I thought about your future. I decided that it was more important to spend that money to defeat the governor's effort than to spend it on my campaign. And I also said to my consultants, we're going to hold our fire. We're not going to start our campaign. We're going to wait until after the special election and focus on the special election and killing the governor's proposition, and rather than spending time and energy on our campaign. What good is it for me to be in the California State Senate if The governor is ravishing our environment, ravishing our future generations, ravishing our education. So those are the kinds of things that I have done, and I have done that continuously because I believe in you, and I believe in our future. And the only way we're going to do that is to provide you with the very best of opportunities. Over the last 4 years in the California State Assembly, I've been a leader in mental health work. I'm a child psychologist by training. I worked in the mental health department, worked in the school system, worked in the mental health day treatment program. Rather than going into private practice, I felt it was extremely important to give back. And so in the California State Assembly, we increased funding for a mental health program. We looked at trying to get more prevention money. We looked at ways in which we can somehow, instead of putting kids in jail, we looked at alternatives in providing mental health care for them. Some people ask, well, how are you different than some of your other opponents? I think one other important distinction is that last several years in the California State Assembly, we've been a leader in coastal protection. We got a resolution passed to say to the federal government, don't go and drill offshore along California, along Alaska, along Oregon or Washington. Don't go out there and drill oil. And we've worked hard to prevent individuals in Washington, D.C. trying to make Farallon Islands sort of a tourist attraction. So we've worked hard to protect our coast. We've also, in the last several years, worked hard to fend off developments. There are people who would like to develop condos along our coast in San Mateo County, and that's absolutely inappropriate. I think that over the years, because of that particular work, recently for this particular election, Vote the Coast, a premier coastal protection environmental organization, endorse our candidacy. And so that's the record that I come here to present to you, to really ask for your support and your vote. I know that it is hard to get your vote. You know, it's not about a lot of song and dance. It's about proving that I deserve. Over the years on the Board of Education, the Board of Supervisors, and now in the State Assembly, we've done the kind of work that you expect, caring for the environment, caring for health care, looking at ways that we can improve public education. Those are the things that we have done. And so, again, let me ask humbly your support and your vote, and together in June we'll be victorious. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much, Assembly Member. I'm going to ask a quick question, and then I have another one from Julia and then Greg. Question for you, just can you give us really quickly your track record on GLBT issues?
Very, very briefly, I have a long history of LGBT issues. When I was on the Board of Education, I supported a Project 10 program. I don't know if you're familiar with that. That's a gay counseling program. Started in LA Unified, worked its way up to San Francisco. It was back in the late 80s. It was unheard of to even think about counseling programs for gay kids whatsoever. I, working with my colleague, Tom Amiano, we were together on the Board of Education, we supported that. And I did that with a lot of risk to me personally. Many individuals in my own community are not that thrilled about counseling programs for gay kids. And so I went to my family association, I went to a lot of organizations, the Chinese people arguing why we needed to do that. And literally, sometimes I was booed. Literally, sometimes I was chastised. How dare you? How dare you turn your back on our community? And my response was that, while you think that I may be turning my back on your community or our community, these children are also our community too. They are part of our community, the larger community in the entire. And so that started my particular effort. When I got onto the Board of Supervisors, people started to ask me if I would support domestic partners benefits. And I gladly did that. When I was on the Board of Supervisors again, we held United Airlines to a tremendous standard, which was that you have to, regardless of whether you think you should or should not, you have to, you're going to go and invest in San Francisco, if you're going to operate in San Francisco, you're going to have to pay domestic partners. You're going to have to provide those kinds of services. Probably one of the most proud moments that I had was that as the Speaker Pro Tem, I preside over the Assembly. And when Mark Leno's bill came up, it was 40 votes. There were many individuals who came up to the podium and said, Leland, call the vote, shut it down. And then I looked up to my right, and Marina Gatto, 16-year-old high school student, has been a strong supporter of mine and worked on this issue and many other issues, looked at me, and I paused, and I took another maybe 15, 20 seconds, and finally the 41st vote came. I called it, and that's how it passed. And it's all those kinds of histories that I have. And I think of late, we have a bill right now that basically says that if you are going to involve yourself in any campaigns at all, you should not use one sexual orientation in a derogative way. You should not use it in a derisive way. And so that bill, unfortunately, the governor vetoed that last year, and he got stung, and so he said that he's going to learn his ways. And so we got that bill again. I think we're going to get it, and this time I would hope that he will vote for it. So that's my issue.
Hi, my question's on Assembly Bill 319, which would ban 2 specific chemicals that are most frequently used in children's toys. These chemicals are already banned in about 17 different countries, repeatedly been proven to be harmful to children, and even Janet Riley has mentioned on her blog their harmful effects. But in committee, you were the only Democrat to vote against it, and I was curious why it didn't have your support.
Good question. There's a bill by Assemblymember Wilma Chan to ban 2 harmful chemicals, phthalates and bisphenol A. And the question was how best to deal with that particular problem, how best to prevent these harmful chemicals to be tasted, licked, ingested by children. And so that was a rather important public policy. And I look hard. One of the things that I'm about is I study issues, I read them, while the former governor says he reads half the bill. I read all of my bills because I know that one day I'm going to come here to you young Democrats, and you're going to ask me those hard questions, and I've got to make sure that I know what I'm talking about. And when I looked at it, it reminded me of another bill a year ago. Senator Micklin had the same kind of an issue. It had to do with cosmetics and toiletry material. Certain chemicals in cosmetics are in fact harmful. And so the industry or the environmental community brought that issue to her and said, well, we got to do something about it. Let's ban some of those chemicals. And she researched that particular issue too. And she also kind of remembered that when the assault ban weapon bill was around, there was an effort to identify specific weapons. And so what happened was that rather than to kind of think much about it, there were certain weapons that were in fact banned. And what happened was the manufacturers would just change a little here and change a little there. And lo and behold, those assault weapons that were banned were reincarnated in another assault weapon. And so the ban just really was going away. So what the senator did was to take that particular lesson, and in her bill, what she did was she created a process. And the process was that now, on cosmetic ingredients, you establish a process whereby any ingredient, any chemical that are seen to be having harmful effects, you would dump that into a process within the State Department of Health. You've got scientists and peer review process, and they'll deliberate that. So even if you try to fix the issue by changing a chemical here and there, you're still going to get caught up. I felt that that was a better process to proceed to protect our children. I didn't want any of those manufacturers, toy manufacturers, to change a chemical here and there. We went ahead and banned bisphenol A and phthalate, and then lo and behold, next year we're going to have to do another bill, and they change a little here. Next year we got to change. So the better process, the better way of handling that issue was to create that process that Senator Micklin basically established for cosmetic ingredients, and I felt that that was a better way. I hope that the good assembly member is going to look at that as a possibility, and if you do that, then I think it'll be better for it.
Okay, thank you. My name is Chris Jackson. I'm president of Associated Students at San Francisco State, and higher education is one of my really big issues. I would like to know, as Assembly member, what have you done to promote higher education within California? And which of the candidates, since you're leaving, which of the candidates for Assembly District 13, Assembly District 12 in your old district do you think actually would still promote higher education within the state of California the best?
All right. As Speaker Pro Tem, I'm part of the leadership within the Assembly, and we kind of decide certain things that we do and so on. One of the things that we are very concerned about relative to higher education is the constant nibbling away of your ability to get a higher education, particularly when you're talking about tuitions or fees constantly going up and so on. 2 years ago, we, the Assembly Democrats, worked hard to stop any fee increases whatsoever. We got into a big fight with the governor, if you remember, whereby individuals who were accepted at UC and CSU were given letters of acceptance, and what the governor did was basically say, well, let's go and retract those letters. We Democrats, part of the leadership, we decided that we were going to find the money so that the governor, in fact, should not and did not have to rescind those letters of acceptance. Unfortunately, what the governor did was he went ahead and did that and threatened those students that if you did not somehow look at an alternative, you're going to have nothing at all. And so we fought that. Unfortunately, even though we got the money, many individuals have left the state because they went and took second choice. Recently, in this particular budget, we have enough money to protect higher ed. There are no fee increases. There are no tuition increases whatsoever. And I think partly because of the good work that you all did, you kicked his butt. You basically sliced him about half an inch down. He's short enough, but you made him even shorter. And so he's pretty much running scared. And so he knows that he does not want to incur your wrath. And as a result, there are no fee increases for this particular budget. And I and the Assembly am absolutely committed to that. To finish your last question, I am supporting Janet Riley. I hope you support her. She's a tremendous candidate. I have a lot of faith that she's going to do well.
Thank you very much, Senator.
Thank you very much. Assembly member. Thank you very much.
Assembly member,
Thank
sorry
you.
about that. I was saying I wouldn't do that with any candidates in all two forums, and I did it. Use their future. Or possible future term. Okay, so that's the end of our forum for the evening. I just want to give a little bit of information for those of you who are SFYD members. We're going to be doing the voting outside in the lobby. Basically, those of you who have attended previous meetings and have your dues paid up, there's going to be a table, check in, you'll get a ballot. It's done instant runoff voting style. So what that means is that there could be as many as 3 columns with all the candidates' names. In the first column, mark your first choice. In the second column, mark your second choice. And in the third column, mark your third choice. In several of them, or in all of them, there's a choice for no endorsement as well, which is a potential. To get the endorsement of the San Francisco Young Democrats, you need to have 60% of the total vote. And if anyone has any questions, do feel free to ask us about how the ballot works. Okay, 1 second. What I want to do before everyone starts running out is there are 1 or 2 announcements that I wanted to let someone come up, or people come up. Who had I had someone on the schedule for an announcement.
Everybody, I'll make it quick. I'm Edie Irons. I'm the president of the East Bay Young Democrats. And we are putting on an amazing event next week, Thursday, February 16th at 7 o'clock. We have Marcos, founder of Daily Kos, one of the biggest Democratic blogs in the country. We've got Hallie Montoya Tanzi, national program director of the League of Pissed Off Voters. We've got the head of the UC Students Association, the political director for the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights, and Barbara Lee's campaign director. All people with amazing youth organizing experience. The topic of the panel is realizing our power, visions for youth organizing in the Bay Area, and we're going to ask questions about what are the issues that we can fight for locally and statewide and actually win on, and what are some strategies to engage young people in politics and exercise the power that we have, especially we've got so many young progressives in the Bay Area. We want to get more of them involved. We, however, are a smaller club than you, and it would be great to have SFYD's support. Both you guys schlepping across the bay, walking a few blocks from the BART station to Humanist Hall. I've got flyers here, but also tell your friends in the East Bay. Owen's going to send out an announcement to you probably tomorrow. And if you could just forward that along to people you know in the East Bay, bring a couple people with you. It's really important that we have a big turnout at this event because we have a great program and we want to do those speakers justice. Thanks.
All right, so the clarification that we wanted on the ballots was that if you vote no endorsement, it goes against the candidates. If you don't have an opinion and don't want it to affect the overall turnout, don't vote at all on that area. And the whole thing about instant runoff voting is that it's stronger for the organization and stronger for everyone involved if you make sure to put as many choices as you can. There is one typo on the ballot. There's two choices for state treasurer. Bill Locklear, two columns. There should only be one. Stem or no endorsement. Thank you all for two very successful forums, and have a great night. Voting will be taking place outside.